Honorable A.B. Lincoln. Dear Sir, I'm a little girl, only 11 years old, but want you should be President of the United States very much, so I hope you won't think me very bold to write to such a great man as you are. Have you any little girls about as large as I am? If so, give them my love, and tell her to write to me if you cannot answer this letter. I have yet got 4 brothers, and part of them will vote for you anyway, and if you let your whiskers grow, I will try and get the rest of them to vote for you. You would look a great deal better, for your face is so thin. All the ladies like whiskers, and they would tease their husbands to vote for you, and then you would be president. My father is going to vote for you, and if I was a man, I would vote for you too, but I will try to get everyone to vote for you that I can think that rail fence around your picture makes it look very pretty. I've got a little baby sister. She is 9 weeks old and is just as cunning as can be. When you direct your letter, direct to Grace Bedell, Westfield, Chautauqua County, New York. I must not write any more. Answer this letter right off. Goodbye, Grace Bedell. Springfield, Illinois, October 19th, 1860. Miss Grace Bedell. My dear little miss, your very agreeable letter of the 15th is received. I regret the necessity of saying I have no daughters. I have 3 sons, one 17, one 9, and one 7 years of age. They, with their mother, constitute my whole family. As to the whiskers, having never worn any, do you not think people would call it a piece of silly affection if I were to begin it now? Your very sincere well-wisher, A. Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. He had 53.9% of the electoral vote and only 40% of the popular vote. He got only 2.1% of the Southern slaveholding vote, was not even allowed on the ballot, and Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. There wasn't even a vote in South Carolina. The electors were just awarded to John C. Breckinridge. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, December 20th, 1860. Henry Wise, a former governor of Virginia, was said to be putting together a militia of 25,000 men to keep Lincoln from taking office. The electoral votes were set to be counted on February 13th. The New York Herald floated a theory that some force may attempt to take the Capitol by violence. Capitol security was enforced by Winfield Scott, the commanding general of the U.S. Army. He said that anyone who attempted by force or unparliamentary disorder to obstruct or interfere with the lawful count would be lashed to the muzzle of a 12-pounder and fired out of the Capitol window. The votes were tallied, and Lincoln was declared president without incident. No one who has never been placed in a like position can understand my feelings at this hour, nor the oppressive sadness I feel at this parting. For more than a quarter of a century, I have lived among you, and during all that time I have received nothing but kindness at your hands. Have I lived from my youth until now? I am an old man. Here the most sacred ties of earth were assumed. Here all my children were born, and here one of them lies buried. To you, dear friends, I owe all that I have, all that I am. All the strange checkered past seems to crowd now upon my mind. Today I leave you. I go to assume a task more difficult than that which devolved upon General Washington. Unless the great God who assisted him shall be with and aid me, I must fail. But if the same omniscient mind and almighty arm that directed and protected him shall guide and support me, I shall not fail. I shall succeed. Let us pray that the God of our fathers may not forsake us now. To him I commend you all. Permit me to ask that with equal security and faith, you all will invoke his wisdom and guidance for me. With these few words I must leave you. For how long I know not. Friends, one and all, I must now bid you an affectionate farewell. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, 24 hours ago at the capital of Indiana, I said to myself, I have never seen so many people assembled together in winter weather. I am no longer able to say that, but it is what might reasonably have been expected, that this great city of Cincinnati would thus acquit herself on such an occasion. My friends, I am entirely overwhelmed by the magnificence of the reception which has been given, I will not say to me, but to the President-elect of the United States of America. Most heartily do I thank you, one and all, for it. I am reminded by the address of your worthy mayor that the reception is given not by any one political party, and if I had not been so reminded by his honor, I could not have failed to know the fact by the extent of the multitude I see before me now. I could not look upon this vast assemblage without being made aware that all parties were united in this reception. This is as it should be. It is as it should have been if Senator Douglas had been elected. It is as it should have been if Mr. Bell had been elected, as it should have been if Mr. Breckinridge had been elected, as it should ever be when any citizen of the United States is constitutionally elected President of the United States. Allow me to say that I think what has occurred here today could not have occurred in any other country on the face of the globe without the influence of the free institutions which we have unceasingly enjoyed for 3/4 of a century. There is no country where the people can turn out and enjoy this day precisely as they please, save under the benign influence of the free institutions of the land. I hope that, although we have some threatening national difficulties now, I hope that while these free institutions shall continue to be in the enjoyment of millions of free people of the United States, we will see repeated every 4 years what we now witness. In a few short years, I and every other individual man who is now living will pass away. I hope that our national difficulties will also pass away, and I hope we shall see in the streets of Cincinnati, good old Cincinnati, for centuries to come, once every 4 years, her people give such a reception as this to the constitutionally elected president of the whole United States. I hope you shall all join in that reception, and that you shall also welcome your brethren far across the river to participate in. We will welcome them in every state of the Union, no matter where they come from. From away south, we shall extend them a cordial will when our present differences shall have been forgotten and blown to the winds forever. I have spoken but once before this in Cincinnati. This was a year previous to the late presidential election. On that occasion, in a playful manner, but with sincere words, I addressed much of what was said to the Kentuckians. I gave my opinion that we, as Republicans would ultimately beat them as Democrats, but that they could postpone the result longer by nominating Senator Douglas for the presidency than they could in any other way. They did not, in any true sense of the word, nominate Douglas, and the result is some certainty as soon as even I expected. I also told them how I expected they would be treated after they should have been beaten, and I now wish to recall their attention to what I then said upon that subject. I then said, when we do, as we say, beat you, you perhaps want to know that we will do with you. I will tell you, so far as I am authorized to speak for the opposition, what we mean to do with you. We mean to treat you as near as we possibly can, as Washington, Jefferson, and Madison treated you. We mean to leave you alone, and in no way to interfere with your institution, to abide by all and every compromise of the Constitution, and in no way to interfere, to abide by all and every compromise of the Constitution, and in a word, coming back to the original proposition, to treat you so far as degenerated men, if we have degenerated men, according to the examples of those noble fathers, Washington, Jefferson, and Madison. We mean to remember that you are as good as we, and there is no difference between us other than the difference of circumstances. We mean to recognize and bear in mind always that you have as good hearts in your bosoms as other people, or as we claim to have, and treat you accordingly. Fellow citizens of Kentucky, friends, brethren, may I call you in my new position. I see no occasion and feel no inclination to retract a word of this. If it shall not be made good, be assured, the fault shall not be mine. And now, fellow citizens of Ohio, have you who agreed with him who now addresses you in political sentiment, have you ever entertained other sentiments towards our brethren of Kentucky than those I have expressed to you? If not, then why shall we not, as heretofore, be recognized and acknowledged as brethren again, living in peace and harmony, one with another? I take your response as the most reliable evidence that it may be so, along with other evidence, trusting that the good sense of the American people on all sides of all rivers in America, under the providence of God, who has never deserted us, that we shall again be brethren, forgetting all parties, ignoring all parties. My friends, I now bid you a farewell. I most cordially thank Honor Mayor Wilson and the citizens of Pittsburg generally for this flattering reception. While it is not given to me alone, but to the cause which I represent, it is under circumstances which clearly prove to me that there is goodwill and sincere feeling at the bottom of it. And here, fellow citizens, I may remark that in every short address I have made to the people, and in every crowd through which I have passed of late, some allusion has been made to the present distracted condition of the country. It is naturally expected that I should say something upon the subject, but to touch upon it all would involve an elaborate discussion of a great many questions. Some circumstances would require more time than I can at present command, and would perhaps unnecessarily commit me upon matters which have not yet fully developed themselves. The condition of the country, fellow citizens, is an extraordinary one, and fills the mind of every patriot with anxiety and solicitude. My intention is to give this subject all the consideration which I possibly can before I speak fully and definitely in regard to it, so that when I do speak, I may be as nearly right as possible. And when I do speak, fellow citizens, I hope to say nothing in opposition to the spirit of the Constitution, contrary to the integrity of the Union, or which will in any way prove inimical to the liberties of the people or to the peace of the whole country. And furthermore, when the time arrives for me to speak on this great subject, I hope to say nothing which will disappoint the reasonable expectations of any men or disappoint the people generally throughout the country, even if their expectations have been based upon anything which I may have heretofore said. Notwithstanding the troubles across the river, there is really no crisis springing from anything in the government itself. In plain words, there's really no crisis except an artificial one. What is there now to warrant the condition of affairs presented by our friends over the river? Take even their own view of the questions involved, and there is nothing to justify the course which they are pursuing. I repeat it then. There is no crisis excepting such as one as may be gotten up at any time by designing politicians. My advice then, under such circumstances, is to keep cool. If the great American people will only keep their temper on both sides of the line, the troubles will come to an end. And the question which now distracts the country will be settled just as surely as all other difficulties of like character which have originated in this government have been adjusted. Let the people on both sides keep their self-possession, and just as other clouds have cleared away in due time, so will this, and this great nation shall continue to prosper as heretofore. According to my political education, I am inclined to believe that the people in the various sections of the country should have their own views carried out through their representatives in Congress. And if the consideration of the tariff bill should be postponed until the next session of the national legislature, no subject should engage your representatives more closely than that of the tariff. And if I have any recommendation to make, it will be that every man who is called upon to serve the people in a representative capacity should study this whole subject thoroughly, as I intend to do so myself, looking to all the varied interests of our common country, so that when the time for action arrives, adequate protection can be extended to the coal and iron of Pennsylvania, the corn of Illinois, and the reapers of Chicago. Permit me to express the hope that this important subject may receive such consideration at the hands of your representatives, that the interests of no part of the country may be overlooked, but that all sections may share in common the benefits of just and equitable tariff. But I am trespassing upon your patience and must bring my remarks to a close, thanking you most cordially for the kind reception which you have extended me. I bid you all adieu. I am glad to see you. I suppose you are to see me, but I certainly think I have the best of the bargain. Some 3 months ago, I received a letter from a young lady here. It was a very pretty letter, and she advised me to let my whiskers grow, as it would improve my personal appearance. Acting partly upon her suggestion, I have done so, and now if she is here, I would like to see her. I think her name was Miss Barley. A small boy, mounted on a post with his mouth and eyes both wide open, cry out, "There she is, Mr. Lincoln," pointing to a beautiful girl with black eyes who was blushing all over her fair face.
"He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die!"
The president left the car, and the crowd making way for him, he reached her and gave her several hearty kisses, and amid the yells of delight from the excited crowd, he bade her goodbye, and on we rushed. I cannot expect to make myself heard by any considerable number of you, my friends, but I appear here rather for the purpose of seeing you and being seen by you. I do not believe that you extend this welcome, one of the finest I have ever received, to the individual man who now addresses you, but rather to the person who represents for the time being the majesty of the Constitution and the government. I suppose that here, as everywhere, you meet me without... I suppose that here, as everywhere, you meet me without distinction of party, but as the people. It is with your aid as the people that I think we shall be able to preserve, not the country, for the country will preserve itself, but the institutions of the country, those institutions which have made us free, intelligent, and happy, the most free, the most intelligent, and the happiest people on the globe. I see that some, at least of you, are of those who believe that an election being decided against them is no reason that they should sink the ship. I believe in sticking to it and carrying it through. And if defeated at one election, I believe in taking the chances next time. I do not think that they have chosen the best man to conduct our affairs. Now, I am sure they did not. But acting honestly and sincerely, and with your aid, I shall be able to get through the storm. In addition to what I have said, I have only to bid you farewell. I am very grateful to you for the honorable reception of which I have been the object. I cannot but remember the place that New Jersey holds in our early history. In the early revolutionary struggle, few of the states among the old 13 had more of the battlefields of the country within their limits than old New Jersey. May I be pardoned if upon this occasion I mention that way back in my childhood, the earliest days of my being able to read, I've got hold of a small book, such as the one as few of the younger members have ever seen, Weems' Life of Washington. I remember all the accounts that were given of the battlefields and struggles for the liberties of the country, and none fixed themselves upon my imagination so deeply as the struggle here at Trenton, New Jersey, the crossing of the river, the contests with the Hessians, the great hardships endured of that time, all fixed themselves on my memory more than any single revolutionary event. And you all know, for you have all been boys, and these early impressions last longer than any others. I recollect thinking them, boy even though I was, and there must have been something more than common than those men struggled for, that's something even more than national independence, that's something that held out a great promise to all the people of the world, to all time to come. I am exceedingly anxious that this union, the Constitution, and the liberties of the people shall be perpetuated in accordance with the original idea for which that struggle was made. And I shall be most happy indeed if I shall be an humble instrument in the hands of the Almighty, and of this, His almost chosen people, for perpetuating the object of that great struggle. You give me this reception, as I understand, without distinction of party. I learn that this body is composed of a majority of gentlemen who, in the exercise of their best judgment and the choice of chief magistrate, do not think I was the man. I understand, nevertheless, that they came forward here to greet me as the constitutional president of the United States, as citizens of the United States, to meet the man who, for the time being, is a representative man of the nation, united by a purpose to perpetuate the union and liberties of the people. As such, I accept this reception more gratefully than I could do did I believe it was intended to me as an individual. I have just enjoyed the honor of a reception by the other branch of this legislature, and I return to you and them my thanks for the reception which the people of New Jersey had given me. Through their chosen representatives to me, as the representative for the time being of the majesty of the people of the United States, I appropriate to myself very little of the demonstrations of respect with which I have been greeted. I think little should be given to any man, but that it should be a manifestation of adherence to the Union and the Constitution. I understand myself to be received here by the representatives of the people of New Jersey, a majority of whom differ in the opinion from those with whom I have acted. This manifestation is therefore to be regarded by me as expressing the devotion to the Union, the Constitution, and the liberties of the people. You, Mr. Speaker, have well said that this is a time when the bravest and the wisest look with doubt and awe upon the aspect presented by our national affairs. Under these circumstances, you will readily see why I should not speak in detail of the course I shall deem it best to pursue. It is proper that I should avail myself of all the information and all the time at my command, in order that when the time arrives in which I must speak officially, I shall be able to take the ground which I deem the best and the safest, and from which I may have no occasion to swerve. I shall endeavor to take the ground I deem most just to the north, the east, the west, the south, and the whole country. I take it, I hope, in good temper, certainly no malice toward any section. I should do all that may be in my power to promote a peaceful settlement of all our difficulties. The man does not live who is more devoted to peace than I am. None who would do more to preserve it, but it may be necessary to put the foot down firmly. And if I do my duty and do right, you will sustain me, will you not? Received as I am by the members of the legislature, the majority of whom do not agree with me in political sentiments, I trust that I may have the assistance in piloting the ship of the state through this voyage, surrounded by perils as it is. For if it should suffer attack now, there will be no pilot ever needed for another voyage. Gentlemen, I have already spoke longer than I intended and must beg leave to stop here. Fellow citizens of the United States, in compliance with a custom as old as the government itself, I appear before you to address you briefly and to take in your presence the oath prescribed by the Constitution of the United States, to be taken by the President before he enters on the execution of his office. I do not consider it necessary at present for me to discuss those matters of administration about which there is no special anxiety or excitement. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of the Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and before open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you. I do but quote from one of those speeches, which I declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. Those who nominated and elected me did so with full knowledge that I had made this and many similar declarations and had never recanted them, and more than this, they placed in the platform for my acceptance and as a law to themselves and to me the clear and emphatic resolution which I now read. Resolved that the maintenance inviolate of the rights of the states, and especially of the right of each state to order and control its own domestic institutions according to its own judgment exclusively, is essential to that balance of power on which the perfection and endurance of our political fabric depend. And we denounce the lawless invasion by armed force of the soil of any state or territory, no matter what the pretext, as among the gravest of crimes. I now reiterate these sentiments, and so doing, I only press upon the public attention the most conclusive evidence of which the case is susceptible, that the property, peace, and security of no section are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration. I add, too, that all the protection which consistently with the Constitution and the laws will be cheerfully given to all the states when lawfully demanded for whatever cause, as cheerfully to one section as to another. There is much controversy about the delivering up of fugitives from service or labor. The clause I now read is as plainly written in the Constitution as any other of its provisions. No person held to service or labor, and one state under the laws thereof escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be charged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. It is scarcely questioned by this provision who intended by those who made it for the reclaiming of what we call fugitive slaves, and the intention of the lawgiver is the law. All members of Congress swear their support to the whole Constitution, to this provision as much as any other. To the proposition, then, that slaves whose causes come within the terms of the clause shall be delivered up, their oaths are unanimous. Now, if they would make the effort in good temper, could they not with nearly equal unanimity frame and pass a law by means of which to keep good that unanimous oath? There is some difference of opinion whether the clause should be enforced by the national or the state authority, but surely that difference is not a very material one. The slave is to be surrendered. It can be of but little consequence to him or to others by which authority it is done. And should anyone in any case be content that his oath shall go uncapped on a merely unsubstantial controversy as to how it shall be kept, again, and any law upon the subject ought not all the safeguards of liberty known as civilized and humane jurisprudence to be introduced, so that a free man be not in any case surrendered as a slave. And might it not be well at the same time to provide by law for the enforcement of that clause in the Constitution, which guarantees that citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. I take the office today with no mental reservations and with no purpose to construe the Constitution or laws by any hypercritical rules. And while I do not choose now to specify particular acts of Congress as proper to be enforced, I do suggest that it will be much safer for all, both in official and private stations, to conform to and abide by all those acts which stand unrepealed than to violate any of them, trusting to find impunity and having them held to be unconstitutional. It is 72 years since the first inauguration of a president under our national Constitution. During that period, 15 different and greatly distinguished citizens have in succession administered the executive branch of the government. They have conducted it through many perils, and generally with great success. Yet with all this scope of precedent, I now enter upon the same task for the brief constitutional term of 4 years under great and peculiar difficulty. Any disruption of the federal union, heretofore only menaced, is now formidably attempted. I hold that in contemplation of universal law and of the Constitution of the Union of these states is perpetual. Perpetuity is implied, if not expressed, in the fundamental law of all national governments. It is safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision in its organic law for its own termination. Continue to execute all the express provisions of the national constitution, and the Union will endure forever, if being impossible to destroy it except by some action and provided for in the instrument itself. Again, if the United States be not a government proper, but an association of states and the nature of contract merely, can it, as a contract, be peaceably unmade by less than all the parties who made it? One party to a contract may violate it, break it, so to speak, but does it not require all to lawfully rescind it? Descending from these general principles, and find the proposition that in legal contemplation the Union is perpetually confirmed by the history of the Union itself. The Union is much older than the Constitution. It was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Association in 1774. It was matured and continued by the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It was further matured in the faith of all of them. 13 states expressly plighted and encouraged that it should be perpetual by the Articles of Confederation in 1778. And finally, in 1787, one of the declared objects for ordaining and establishing the Constitution was to form a more perfect union. But if destruction of the Union by one or by a part only of the states be lawfully possible, the Union is less perfect than before the Constitution, having lost the vital element of perpetuity. It follows from these views that no state upon its own mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union, that resolves and ordinances to that effect are legally void, and that acts of violence within any state or states against the authority of the United States are insurrectionary or revolutionary according to circumstances. I therefore consider that in view of the Constitution and the laws, the Union is unbroken, and to the extent of my ability, I shall take care, as the Constitution itself expressly enjoins upon me, that the laws of the Union be faithfully executed in all the states. Doing this, I deem to be only a simple duty on my part, and I shall perform it as far as practicable, unless my rightful masters, the American people, shall withhold their requisite means, or in some authoritative manner direct the contrary. I trust this will not be regarded as a menace, and only as the declared purpose of the Union, that it will constitutionally defend and maintain itself. In doing this, there needs to be no bloodshed or violence, and there shall be none unless it be forced upon the national authority. The power confided to me will be used to hold, occupy, and possess the property and places belonging to the government, and to collect the duties and imposts. But beyond what may be necessary for these objects, there will be no invasion, no using of force against or among the people anywhere. Where hostility to the United States as any interior locality shall be so great and universal as to prevent competent resident citizens from holding the federal offices, there will be no attempt to force obnoxious strangers among the people for that object. While the strict legal right may exist in the government to enforce the exercise of these offices, the attempt to do so would be so irritating and so nearly impracticable withal that I deem it better to forego for the time the uses of such offices. The males, unless repelled, will continue to be furnished in all parts of the Union. So far as possible, the people everywhere shall have the sense of perfect security, which is most favorable to calm thought and reflection. The course here indicated will be followed unless current events and experience shall show a modification of change to be proper, and in any case, an exigency. My best discretion will be exercised according to circumstances actually existing and with a view and a hope of a peaceful solution of the national troubles and the restoration of fraternal sympathies and affections. That there are persons in one section or another who seek to destroy the Union at all events and are glad at any pretext to do it, I will neither affirm nor deny. But if there be such, I need to address no word to them. To those, however, who really love the Union, may I not speak. Before entering upon so grave a matter as the destruction of our national fabric, with all of its benefits, its memories, and its hopes, would it not be wise to ascertain precisely why we do it? Will you hazard so desperate a step while there is any possibility that any portion of the ills you fly from here have no real existence? Will you, while this certain ills you fly to are greater than all the real ones you fly from, will you risk the commission of so fearful a mistake? All profess to be content if all constitutional rights can be maintained. Is it true, then, that any right plainly written in the Constitution has been denied? I think not. Happily, the human mind is so construed that no party can reach to the audacity of doing this. Think, if you can, of a single instance in which a plainly written provision of the Constitution has ever been denied. If by the mere force of numbers a majority would deprive a minority of any clearly written constitutional right, it might, in a moral point of view, justify revolution. Certainly would, if such a right were a vital one. But such is not our case. All the vital rights of minorities and of individuals are so plainly assured to them by affirmations and negations, guarantees and prohibitions, and the Constitution that controversies never arise concerning them. But no organic law can ever be framed with a provision specifically applicable to every question which may occur in practical administration. No foresight can anticipate, nor any document of reasonable length contain express provisions for all possible questions. Shall fugitives from labor be surrendered by national or by state authority? The Constitution does not expressly say. May Congress prohibit slavery in the territories? The Constitution does not expressly say. Must Congress protect slavery in the territories? The Constitution does not expressly say. From questions of this class spring all our constitutional controversies, and we divide upon them into majorities and minorities. If the minority will not acquiesce, the majority must, or the government must cease. There is no other alternative, for continuing the government is acquiescence on one side or another. If a minority in such case will succeed rather than acquiescence, they make a precedent which in turn will divide and ruin them. For a minority of their own will secede from them whenever a majority refuses to be controlled by such minority. For instance, why may not any portion of a new confederacy a year or two hence arbitrarily secede again, precisely as portions of the present union now claim to secede from it? All who cherish disunion sentiments are now being educated to the exact temper of doing this. Is there such perfect identity of interests among the states to compose a new union as to produce harmony only and prevent renewed secession. Plainly, the central idea of secession is the essence of anarchy. A majority held in restraint by constitutional checks and limitations, and always changing easily with deliberate changes of popular opinions and sentiments as the only true sovereign of a free people. Whoever rejects it does of necessity fly to anarchy or to despotism. Unanimity is impossible. The rule of a minority as a permanent arrangement is wholly inadmissible, so that rejecting the majority principle, anarchy or despotism in some form is all that is left. I do not forget the position assumed by some that constitutional questions are to be decided by the Supreme Court, nor do I deny that such decisions must be binding in any case upon the parties to a suit as to the object of that suit, while they are also entitled to very high respect and consideration in all parallel cases by all other departments of the government. And while it is obviously possible that such decision may be erroneous in any given case, still the evil effect following it, being limited to that particular case with the chance that it may be overruled and never become a precedent for other cases, can better be borne than could the evils of a different practice. At the same time, the candid citizen must confess that if the policy of the government upon vital questions affecting the whole people is to be irrevocably fixed by decisions of the Supreme Court, the instance they are made in ordinary litigation between parties, in particular personal actions, the people will have ceased to be their own rulers, having to that extent practically resigned their government into the hands of that eminent tribunal. Nor is there, in this view, any assault upon the court of the judges. It is a duty from which they may not shrink to decide cases properly brought before them, and it is no fault of theirs if others seek to turn their decisions to political purposes. One section of our country believes slavery is right and ought to be extended, while the others believes it is wrong and ought not to be extended. This is the only substantial dispute. The fugitive slave clause of the Constitution and the law of the suppression of the foreign slave trade are each as well enforced, perhaps, as any law can ever be in the community where the moral sense of the people imperfectly supports the law itself. The great body of the people abide by that dry legal obligation in both cases, and a few break over in each. This, I think, cannot be perfectly cured, and it would be worse in both cases after the separation of the sections than before. The foreign slave trade, now imperfectly suppressed, would be ultimately revived without restriction in one section, while fugitive slaves, now only partially surrendered, would not be surrendered at all by the other. Physically speaking, we cannot separate. We cannot remove our respective sections from each other or build an impassable wall between them. A husband and wife may be divorced and go out of their presence and beyond the reach of each other, but the different parts of our country cannot do this. They cannot but remain face to face, and intercourse, either amicable or hostile, must continue between them. Is it possible then to make the intercourse more advantageous or more satisfactory after separation than before? Can aliens make treaties easier than friends can make laws? Can treaties be more faithfully enforced between aliens than laws can among friends? Suppose you go to war. You cannot fight always, and when, after much loss on both sides and no gain on either, you cease fighting, the identical old questions as to terms of intercourse are again upon you. This country, with its institutions, belongs to the people who inhabit it. Whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it or their revolutionary right to dismember or overthrow it. I cannot be ignorant of the fact that many worthy and patriotic citizens are desirous of having the national constitution amended. While I make no recommendation of amendments, I fully recognize the rightful authority of the people over the whole subject to be exercised in either of the modes prescribed in the instrument itself, and I should, under existing circumstances, favor rather than oppose a fair opportunity being afforded the people to act upon it. I will venture to add that to me the convention mode seems preferable, and that it allows amendments to originate with the people themselves, instead of only permitting them to take or reject propositions originated by others, not especially chosen for the purpose, and which might not be precisely such as they would wish to either accept or refuse. I understand proposed amendment to the Constitution, which amendment, however, I have not seen, has passed Congress to the effect that the federal government shall never interfere with the domestic institutions of the states, including that of persons held to service. To avoid misconstruction of what I have said, I depart from my purpose not to speak of particular amendments, so far as to say that holding such a provision to now be implied constitutional law, I have no objection to its being made express and irrevocable. The chief magistrate derives all of his authority from the people, and they have referred none upon him to fix terms for the separation of the states. The people themselves can do this if they also choose, but the executive as such has nothing to do with it. His duty is to administer the present government as it came to his hands and to transmit it unimpaired by him to his successor. Why should there not be patient confidence in the ultimate justice of the people? Is there any better or equal hope in the world? Is our present differences, is either party without faith of being in the right? If the almighty ruler of nations and his eternal truth and justice be on your side of the north or on yours of the south, that truth and that justice will surely prevail by the judgment of this great tribunal of American people. By the frame of the government under which we live, the same people have wisely given the public servants but little power for mischief, and have with equal wisdom provided for the return of the little to our own hands at very short intervals. While the people retain their virtue and vigilance, no administration by any extreme of wickedness or folly can very seriously injure the government in the short space of 4 years. My countrymen, one and all, think calmly and well upon this whole subject. Nothing valuable can be lost by taking time. If there be any object to hurry any of you in hot haste to a step which you would never take deliberately, that object will be frustrated by taking time. But no good object can be frustrated by it. Such of you as are now dissatisfied still have the Constitution unimpaired, and on the sensitive point, the laws of your own framing under it. Well, the new administration will have no immediate power, if it would, to change either. If it were admitted that you who are dissatisfied hold the right side in the dispute, there is still no single good reason for precipitate action. Intelligence, patriotism, Christianity, and a firm reliance on him who has never yet forsaken this favored land are still competent to adjust in the best way all our present difficulty. In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, while I shall have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. I am loath to close, We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained it, must not break our bonds of affection, the mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. After the inauguration, Lincoln had sworn office. He took a ride back to the White House with the president that was leaving, James Buchanan, who was quoted as saying, "If you are as happy, my dear sir, on entering this house as I am in leaving it and returning home, you are the happiest man in the country."